Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku, and it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Psst, healthcare pros, word's out, and it's too good to keep quiet. Look, LinkedIn is revolutionizing job hunting, making it possible to search by specialty, shift preference, and salary. Endless scrolling is out. Whether it's a mental health therapist or dental hygienist, finding the perfect role is faster and easier than ever. Head to linkedin.com/healthcare and start your search today.
Hello and welcome to Backlisted, the podcast that gives new life to old books. Today you find the three of us connecting across the ether for the first time in 2022. The Christmas baubles have been stowed away, the last mince pie has been eaten, the Yule log extinguished, but the pile of books on the table continues to grow. I'm John Mitchinson, the publisher of Unbound, the platform where readers crowdfund the books they really want to read.
I'm Andy Miller, author of The Year of Reading Dangerously.
And I'm Nikki Birch, the producer of Backlisted and co-host of Lotlisted.
Yay!
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Hey.
And today it's just the three of us discussing the books we've been reading over the Christmas break, and we're calling it our winter reading special. Not summer reading, everybody. Winter reading. Do you see?
Can we call it the winter of our reading special?
Yes, let's call it that. It's the winter of our reading special. But before we get on to the books that we've been reading and you might enjoy reading in the months ahead, it's time for a quiz.
Yay!
Oh, Andy.
No, don't worry. I didn't set this one.
Half an hour later.
I liked that you didn't think that the last quiz was difficult, Andy. It was very amusing.
You know what? We shouldn't get off topic immediately, but it really wasn't that hard. And all you people who've complained about it, have a word with yourselves. My best friend from school thought it was pretty easy.
Top quizzes Frank Cottrell Boyce and John Mitchinson would beg to disagree.
But yeah, all right. That's fair.
I'm still impressed that I beat John Mitchinson in a quiz.
There you go.
It's unprecedented.
You did have a Fellow of All Souls. No, you didn't. You had Frank, obviously.
You had the Fellow of All Souls.
The Fellow of All Souls.
I did listen back to it and thought my glee at how hard it was perhaps too apparent, actually. So I'm sorry about that, everybody.
Fine, we loved it.
Anyway, we've got a different quiz. And this is a quiz set by Backlisted listener Edie, who is 7 years old.
Hello, Edie.
Edie. Hello.
Thanks, Edie. This is really great. Edie's mum, Carolyn, contacted us to say that Edie and her brother Tom both love reading and they've read loads of books over the last year or two during lockdown. And that Edie has just published the first issue of a magazine called Books Are Us, and her mum sent me a few photos of the prototype issue, Books Are Us. Edie, it just looks brilliant,
amazing.
Legend.
So thank you for sharing it with us. And on the front cover, it promises 5 things to read, a book quiz, and much more. So if you like Backlisted listeners, make sure you get hold of a copy of Books Are Us, because it's basically the same format, but better than us. Anyway, Edie's written us a quiz.
Fantastic.
And so I'm going to ask John and Nikki the questions.
What's it on?
Really good. It's a book quiz, Nikki.
Perfect.
Let's be honest, it's a big subject.
What Edie is asking you for, guys, and it's first person to answer is fine, is could we have the title of the book? That's all we want, just the title of the book and the author if you want to
show off.
Yeah. All right. So I'm just going to, and Edie's written a little blurb for each one. So I'm just going to read you Edie's blurb and then you tell me what the book is. So question 1, here we go. Father goes and comes back.
Railway Children.
Yes, Nikki, it's The Railway Children by E. Nesbit. John couldn't remember 2 weeks back, but that is what it is.
I've got the advantage of not having had COVID in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's true.
Well,
That's true.
It's also
John's off his game. Still everything to play for.
everything to play for.
Okay, so that was great. Father Goes and Comes Back. That's The Railway Children by E. Nesbit. Question 2. They become poor during the war. They become poor during the war.
Carrie's War?
Is that your answer, John?
That is my answer, yeah.
I'm afraid that's not correct. So I throw it over to Nikki
Poor
Birch.
during the war.
They become poor during the war.
Oh, gosh.
Nikki, I'd just like to say I had to ask Edie's mum what the answer to this was.
They
Because
become.
it's hard. This is the hard question.
I'm trying to think of...
You'll kick yourself,
Which
though.
war?
I'm afraid that stop quibbling with a 7-year-old.
They become poor during the war. I don't know. It's a classic, isn't it? It's another classic.
Yeah.
It's one of the most famous books for young people ever written.
Not The Silver Sword? Not...
It's not the
It's
Silver
not
Sword.
Swallows
John.
and Amazons.
It's not Swallows and
not-
Amazons,
what they-
Nikki.
During the
war.
war.
Do you give up?
Yeah, go on.
Edie, you got me and you got them. It's Little Women.
Oh my
by-
God. Do you know what?
Brilliant.
That's awful because I watched that last night.
Thing is,
Shame on me.
this is interesting, isn't it? Because war, I just think of Blitz and
Yeah.
Doodlebugs.
Yeah,
and,
me too.
And kids in
Ah.
short trousers and shrapnel and yeah, brilliant.
Edie.
Brilliant
Edie, you're
question.
brilliant.
Brilliant question. And so on to the third one.
Yeah.
It could still be a draw. Goes to wizarding school.
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter.
Oh, John Mitchens.
Oh, you got there.
I will give you that.
It
Yes,
could be.
absolutely.
Harry
Worst
Potter
witch.
and the Chamber of Secrets.
Yes,
Just
to be fair, John, let's choose a specific book. But my
good.
goodness, what a brilliant quiz.
Very
Thank you.
good.
Thank you, Edie and Carolyn and Tom as well for listening to the show and for sending that in. It was brilliant.
Superb. In fact, I'm going to steal that middle question. That's a really good question.
It's a good question, isn't it?
It really is.
It's really good. Also, we'd like to say to everybody listening to this who listened to Christmas Day and sent the episode on the Railway Children,
Thank you.
sent feedback about it. Thank you very, very much. Thanks to Catherine and Frank for being the guests, and to listeners for all the wonderful feedback. And also, we should just say thank you everyone who's listening to this. We hit 1 million downloads in a year last year. Which it actually landed, didn't it, Nikki, on Christmas Day?
Yeah, it's pretty
I
amazing.
don't want to say that was the most magical thing about this Christmas, but it wasn't far off. So thanks very much, everybody. That's been brilliant. What shall we talk about on our winter reading special, everybody?
We're going to talk about a few books, and we're not doing the normal thing of discussing one book. 'Cause it's a bit like, what have I been reading, but ad infinitum.
Yeah, what have you been reading this month is the question.
That's right.
So shall I kick off?
Yeah.
What have you been reading, Andy, this winter?
Well, this winter, which people might like to read in the months ahead, I thought this would be a really nice opportunity to talk about a few books of poetry that I've been reading, because we don't often talk about poetry on Backlisted. And these are all new, published in 2021. And the first one I'm going to talk about is The Kids by Hannah Lowe, which is published by Blood Axe. And last night it won the Costa, or the night before, it won the Costa Poetry Award. And it's also shortlisted for the T.S. Eliot Prize. Hannah Lowe, I think this is her second or third volume. She was a teacher, and she taught for a decade in an inner city London sixth form. And The Kids of the title refers to her students, the teenagers that she taught. But the kids also mean the poems that she writes retrospectively about herself as a teenager in the 80s and 90s. And indeed her own children, her own children. So there's a conversation going on between generations of young people, herself looking back, the children she taught, the teenagers she taught in school, and her own small son. And it's a really lovely collection. And it's written in the form of sonnets, although I'm going to confess that I didn't know that when I was reading it. It's the sort of poetic conceit that passed me by. So in a sense, it matters and it doesn't matter that it's written in sonnet form. They're short, really. So I'll read you a few of them, and I've chosen 3 that I feel give you a sense of... Have either of you read this book, by the way?
No, although it's on my list because yeah, everything I've read about it makes me think I would love it.
I can see it being very popular. It's very accessible and moving. I recommend all the books that I'm going to talk about today. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking about them. But I think you'll really like this. So this is the first one. This is called The Sixth Form Theatre Trip. And it starts off with an epigraph, an anonymous epigraph. Do I mean epigraph? Yes, I do.
What does epigraph mean?
A quote from somebody else.
Okay.
Not an epigram. That's why let's not get bogged down in me thinking aloud. That would be terrible. Anyway, this is called The Sixth Form Theatre Trip. And the epigraph reads, anonymous, this is more like bloody dog walking than teaching. You've got more dogs than you can count. Big dogs and small. One badass dog in headphones mooching up the aisle. A dog who smuggled in a hot dog. 2 loving dogs, back row, already smooching. Some dogs are up on haunches, barking. A dog or 2 already dozing, heads in paws, dogs sighing and dreaming. The other theatre dogs look down their snouts. A pair of tutting chow-chows, some Sloaney poodles in the box. But when the curtains lift and your dogs are hypnotised, their ears like little hoisted sails, the wag of tails, their shining dog hearts fling wide open. They know these words, these lines, memorised like buried bones. And don't you love your dogs?
That's so good. Oh my God, I get it now. The sixth form theatre trip, when you've been studying that text forever and you finally go and see it. Amazing.
Want to hear another one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This one's called Pepys, as in Samuel Pepys.
Yeah.
The posh girls came and took a corner table, all lip gloss and ribbony hair, each with a fan of starry GCSEs, a summer of youth hostels in Europe behind them, and the future wide open to them like a rainbow parasol, or so I thought. It was Restoration Comedies, and I was reading the class an essay, and though I'd seen his name, I'd never heard it. Pepys. I said it. Pepys. Over and over, until one girl spoke up. Do you mean Pepys? She said. Her voice pulled taut as a noose, as if I were the girl and she the teacher. And what could I have said? I read on. Pepys. 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 Cool. Cool as the trickster. Ridiculous as the fool.
Brilliant.
So there's one poem about her taking sixth formers to the theatre and another poem about her being a sixth former. And then the final one I'd like to read is called Sonnet for Rosie. And this, it seems, brings both the previous things we've heard together. Sonnet for Rosie. That girl called Rosie, soft-spoken, shyly clever, always dressed in high tops, corduroys, a khaki bomber, and everywhere I saw her, kissing or holding the hand of a graceful black boy from the year above, turned out to be my old professor's daughter. I can't recall who told me. It doesn't matter. But how clearly I remember catching a bus to Stamford Hill to find his flat, short dress, red lips, and lost, I asked two men in big fur hats who looked straight through me, walking on. But I found his door, and upstairs talked music, film, ate buttered toast, while a tiny girl called Rosie grabbed my book and crawled away across his kitchen floor. So it's all there, those generations of child and pupil and teacher. So that's published by Blood Axe. That's called The Kids by Hannah Lowe, and that's the first of my poetry recommendations today. John Mitchinson, what have you been reading over the last month in your sickbed?
Well, I always love to have a bit of a tackle, a big history book at.
Especially when I've got COVID and really ill.
Especially when I've been, let's be honest, I have been compromised, and the book that I chose is it's already, I think, a bestseller, kind of number one in prehistory on Amazon. Is a brilliant, mind-bending bit of history by David Graeber, the late David Graeber, anthropologist, and one of the theorists behind the Occupy movement, and David Wengrow, an archaeologist. And they have been working on this book for 10 years, or were working up to David Graeber's untimely death last year. And it is the most brilliant examination of the last sort of 30,000 years of human history, most of which has been obviously lived in, we had always traditionally been told, small family bands of hunter-gatherers, kind of being small family bands of hunter-gatherers until we discovered farming. And then we started farming, and then we started to have cities, and then we started to have kings and laws and police and money. And so it's a kind of, what if that isn't true? Because it isn't true. The archaeological evidence that we've amassed over the last 50 years is beginning to show us that our whole vision of history is based on a sort of back formation, that we assume that everything is led up to what we've got now. There is no possible alternative. This is what it's. The dynamic, they say, is a sort of flip-flop between the Hobbesian idea of human history, which is that life is nasty, brutal, and short, and human beings are venal and unpleasant. I'll come on to that in a moment. And the Rousseauian idea that the noble savage, that we were the fall from grace, that we were once used to live in Eden and everybody got along. And they're just saying, check out the evidence, guys. The evidence doesn't suggest that. The evidence suggests that for the much more complex and interesting picture. And they have researched, it's just phenomenal amount of research that's gone into it, but it's written in this, I'm going to read you a bit, it's written in this clear, quite punchy, you could give this to anybody, big kind of capital letters at the beginning of each small section saying, exactly why they're, I'm totally in love with this book. It's the best history book I've read for a long, long time.
How long did you say it was?
Well, it is about 700 pages long, but quite a lot.
How many years' work is it though?
It's 10 years, and there's quite a lot of footnotes.
Wow.
I think the text runs to about 560 pages, and to say that I devoured it, I am interested in prehistory. I'm interested in archaeology and anthropology, but it's like every page there's a sort of zinger, and you're thinking, what? How have I got to this stage of my life and not know more about it? So if you've ever been to Stonehenge and pondered what the hell was going on, if you've ever thought about, there's a very simple idea, right? We have had the same brain, more or less, for the last 250,000 years.
Right.
There is this theory that we didn't start doing anything useful with it until about 70,000 years ago, because that's the only stuff that we found. We only found stuff that's old.
Yeah.
So it's the old, why would we assume, as Jared Diamond, another big theorist, and Yuval Harari, we assume that early human beings were living lives of sort of savagery, like kind of apes. And yet, why do we think that? It's just a ridiculous thing to think if you think about it. If they had the same brains, why weren't they capable of political thought, of deciding that actually one of the things about farming, quite often they started farming and then they got bored with it and decided they prefer to go back to a more kind of mixed life of foraging. The world was relatively underpopulated at those times. They were having to deal sometimes with climate. It's really, the narrative is beautifully done. I'll read you a little bit just to give you a flavour of the punchy, really, really well written, amazingly researched. I've got a list of books now I want to go and read on the back of it. So they're talking about the modern day Hobbesian. would argue, yes, we did live most of our evolutionary history in tiny bands who could get along mainly because they shared a common interest in the survival of their offspring, parental investment, as evolutionary biologists call it. But even these were in no sense founded on equality. There was always in this version some alpha male leader. Hierarchy and domination and cynical self-interest have always been the basis of human society. It's just that collectively, we've learned it's to our advantage to prioritize our long-term interests over our short-term instincts, or better, to create laws that force us to confine our worst impulses to socially useful areas like the economy, while forbidding them everywhere else. As the reader can probably detect from our tone, we don't much like the choice between these two alternatives. Our objections can be classified into three broad categories. As accounts of the general course of human history, they, 1, simply aren't true, 2, have dire political implications, and 3, make the past needlessly dull. This book is an attempt to begin to tell another, more hopeful and more interesting story, one which at the same time takes better account of what the last few decades of research have taught us. Partly, this is a matter of bringing together evidence that has accumulated in archaeology, anthropology, and kindred disciplines. Evidence that points towards a completely new account of how human societies developed over roughly the last 30,000 years. Almost all of this research goes against the familiar narrative, but too often the most remarkable discoveries remain confined to the work of specialists or have to be teased out by reading between the lines of scientific publications. To give just a sense of how different the emerging picture is, it is clear now that human societies before the advent of farming were not confined to small egalitarian bands. On the contrary, the world of hunter-gatherers as it existed before the coming of agriculture was one of bold social experiments, resembling a carnival parade of political forms, far more than it does the drab abstractions of evolutionary theory. Agriculture, in turn, did not mean the inception of private property, nor did it mark an irreversible step towards inequality. In fact, many of the first farming communities were relatively free of ranks and hierarchies. And far from setting class differences in stone, a surprising number of the world's earliest cities were organised on robustly egalitarian lines, with no need for authoritarian rulers, ambitious warrior politicians, or even bossy administrators. And so it goes on. Anyway.
This sounds like leftist propaganda of the most outrageous stripe.
It makes sense because, you know, when you look at people say, oh, how did they do that, Stonehenge? And how did they do that? The Egyptians, how do they build this? Because they're clever.
Like we are clever.
Like we're clever.
It's honestly, it's the most refreshing. It's the most refreshing history book I've read in a long time.
What's it called?
It's called The Dawn of Everything.
Who's it by?
And it's by David Graeber and David Wengrow, and it's published by Alan Lane.
Very good. Right. Well, listen. Well, people's brains already palpitating with the art and science they've been pummeled with. Nikki Birch, what have you been reading over this winter period?
Well, I've been reading a very nice German translation called Love in 5 Acts by Daniela Krein.
Oh, I like that cover.
Oh, look at that. Beautiful.
It's nice, isn't it? And it's a really lovely book. And I suppose I just wanted to talk about it because it was just such a, I suppose, you know, when you just want to have a book that just makes you forget about everything else and just enjoy reading it. And that's what this book did for me. And at the end of it, I just looked up who Daniela Krein, and it comes to no surprise to me to know that she's exactly the same age as me.
It spoke to you.
It spoke to me, okay. Exactly. So if you're a 46-year-old, middle-aged, grey-haired woman, you might enjoy this.
That's everyone who listens to this, so that's fine. Did you, apart from our 7-year-old listener, did you...
Edie, apologies.
Is this a new book?
Newish, yeah.
Yes. It was published last year, right?
Yeah, it was published last year. It's a translation by someone called Jamie Bullock did the translation.
Oh, lovely Jamie Bullock.
Do you know Jamie Bullock? Oh, right. Well, he's done a very good job. You can tell him. He's very good.
He's very good.
It's called Love in 5 Acts. And I suppose what's so nice about it is we were talking, I think it might have been on a lock listed, Andy, but we were talking about 3 women.
We were indeed.
The non-fiction Lisa Taddeo book. And this... has a very small sort of similarities in that, and then it's 5 women, and it's fictitious. So, but it's talking about love rather than relations. But in this case, they are all heterosexual love. So they are all about relationships with men. So that's the sort of similarities. But it is a novel in the way that 3 women.
It's non-fiction.
It's written is non-fiction, but it's written in a similar way.
Okay.
And what's so lovely about it is it's a bit like, I've read a few Japanese novels when they've been translated, and they're lovely and sparse.
Yeah.
You know, and it's got that sort of those gaps.
Yeah, okay.
It's very sparse and it doesn't tell you everything. And I really like that. It looks at 5 women's sort of romantic lives as they move into middle age, with all the kind of complexity and baggage that comes with that. And all these women are linked in some way, but there's no kind of conclusive narrative. It doesn't wrap up neatly or anything like that. It's just linked by complexities of being a woman. And a woman in Germany, it touches on having a history of having been born in East Germany, but you know that's the sort of backdrop. But it does this really great thing where it jumps about in time. You're never quite sure when they're speaking or what point in time in each of the narratives, but that's kind of, it's okay, and it follows it really well, and that kind of adds to that sort of space that it gives it. It's really beautiful, and I think I read a nice little review that says, that probably does a better job of describing it than me, but says, with psychological refinement, Daniela Krein recounts the chaos of feelings and the short half-life of modern ways of living.
Nice.
And I thought, oh, that's really lovely.
This is going to be my pedestrian question every time we talk about a book today.
Yeah.
How long is it? that's what I'm reduced to. How long is Love in 5 Acts?
It's 249 pages, but there's lovely big spacing between the words.
That sounds restful compared with everything we've been talking about. It's really great.
Yeah. Can I read you a little bit?
Please.
So this is Judith, one of the 5 women. And Judith is more interested in her horse than dating, but she does go on internet dating sites. Okay. Judith clicks on another message. Judge, 52, with photograph. Dear stranger, it will be a pleasure to have the opportunity to invite you for a walk and a coffee afterwards. I was most interested by your profile. Our promising compatibility results leave me hopeful of a positive response. Yours, G.H. Judith looks at his profile. 1.82 metres, non-smoker, 2 children, none at home, exercises several times per week. How does his perfect day begin? With the woman I love. What is he allergic to? Broken promises and inconsiderateness. 3 things that are important to him: my children, my lover, and art. She looks at his picture again. 14 years of visible age difference. Despite this, she checks her compatibility results with GH. Their gender role balance is exactly the same. Both of them scoring 104 points for my masculine side and 109 for my feminine side. For how empathetic are you? The 2 of them both notch up an above average 118. Judith only gets 85 for adaptability, whereas his score is 109. In the categories willingness to compromise, introversion, generosity and determination, they deviate from each other by no more than 3 points. She rarely has a result like this. GH gets a message.
So great.
No, it's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
So
that's called Love in 5 Acts by Daniela Krein.
Very good. So we've covered poetry, history, science, fiction in translation. Get a bonus point for that. I've got poetry again.
Good.
So this is another book that's shortlisted for the T.S. Eliot Prize and also is shortlisted for the Forward Prize for Poetry Collection. It's by a poet called Salima Hill, who is published by Blood Axe, and it's called Men Who Feed Pigeons.
Brilliant.
And it's quite challenging to both talk about and read this, only because there should be a lot of space around each very short poem to allow each one to sink in. We don't really have the time to do that. But I can tell you that I've actually read this book twice over Christmas, because the first go-round was one of those books that was just the warm-up for the second go-round. This is something like Salima Hill's 20th collection. She is, I believe she is in her 70s. And So she is a veteran and she is prolific. And this is a collection of 7 sequences of very short poems. And I'm going to read to you a bit from the 3rd sequence, which is called Billy, which is about a relationship, a friendship between a man and a woman. You are left to do quite a lot of thinking about what the circumstances of that friendship might be. But just to say, the other sequences in this book include, the first one is called The Anaesthetist, which is about men at work. The second one is called The Beautiful Man with the Unpronounceable Name, which is about somebody else's husband. Biro is about living next door to a mysterious uncle with a dog. I mean, they're so wonderful. They're so, and each little sequence is like, each poem talks to all the other poems. So to get the full sense of it, you can't really just read one at a time. But nevertheless, I'm going to read a few of them from Billy, which, as I say, is about a friendship between a man and a woman. And I'm just bringing my interpretation here, but I think the 2 friends may have known one another quite a long time, and that one of them is becoming ill. That's my feeling. I don't know for sure, but so the second poem in the sequence is called What It Feels Like to Talk to Him, and it runs like this. When I talk, it feels like I'm talking to somebody who doesn't speak English, somebody who's new to this country and doesn't understand what's going on. And that's the poem in its entirety, right?
That's great.
So that's I'm going to read it again because I want to give the space around it. It's called What It Feels Like to Talk to Him. When I talk, it feels like I'm talking to somebody who doesn't speak English, somebody who's new to this country and doesn't understand what's going on. That's it. Okay, so I'm now going to read you a sequence from the middle of Billy. I'm going to read you 6 poems in a row, and I'm not going to say anything between them. So you don't have to react to them, guys. You just let them sit.
Okay.
First poem is called My Life as a Pair of Crocs. I try to look both earnest and adorable, like surgeons' crocs before they're sprayed with blood. The extra large crab sandwich. He orders me an extra large crab sandwich. I do my best to look pleased to see. I do my best to do what God would do, if God exists, and if he eats crab. The sea. He's sitting with his back to the sea, facing the car park in a bobble hat. I myself am facing the sea. I thought the sea was the whole point.
That's great.
On the beach. On the beach, he shouts at my dog. I say, don't shout. He buys himself a bun. Kindness. Some of us like to be kind, and some of us are tired and can't be bothered. And finally, in this section, trolley. He's like a patient propped up on a trolley who doesn't want to know he's going home, who can't or won't respond to the arms trying and failing to help him.
What do you think them being so short brings to the poems?
It makes them endlessly rereadable. It's really fascinating. Every time I read through this, even as I've been reading it to you, I've been thinking, that's interesting. That goes with that thing I read in 6 pages time, or that in a sense, forgive me, it's all one poem. I mean, they're tiny, tiny Cohen-like poems, but they add up to a bigger thing, and the feeling of them. And I just end by reading you the last 2. And the final one is the longest poem, I think, in this sequence, and maybe in the whole book. Anyway, the first one says, The hospital at night. The patients are adrift on their wards, like dust and sugar in the kitchenette. The doctor says, There's no way of knowing which of them will pass away next. Do you want to hear the last one?
Go on.
It's a bit of a heartbreaker. It's called Kilimanjaro, Kilimanjaro, Kilimanjaro. I ask too many questions. Why is the orange orange? What's that noise? Who is Offa? How can it be shown flamingo lilies purify the air? Who called Kilimanjaro, Kilimanjaro? Which is worse, jealousy or envy? Does he agree with the so-called moral relativists that what is right for some is wrong for others? And why do drag queens seem to love the 50s? Macintoshes, shampoo and sets. And by the time I ask him if the doctor has mentioned blepharitis, he's asleep. His eyes, already small, look even smaller, defeated, like two pigs in a poke. So that is Salima Hill's collection, Men Who Feed Pigeons. What I thought was interesting to do with this on this backlisted is I'm going to do another collection of poetry before we end. But I thought it was worth saying, these are all shortlisted collections by women. They're all wildly different from one another.
Absolutely.
Because why wouldn't they be? Because they're different poets writing about different things. And actually, I was a bit anxious about reading the Salima Hill because you could so easily rattle past it. But actually, it really sat very happily there as we talked about it. So
they have those amazing, almost like imagistic thing, don't they? The kind of the 2 or 3 lines. I mean, I love short poetry like that. I really, really.
They're very English, I would say.
Yeah,
they're very sort of almost. You can almost feel a strain of Alan Bennett or Victoria Wood running through them. Yet at the same time, they are poetry.
Yeah, very much so. Beautiful.
They do land on your brain and stay there. And the more you read them, like I say, the more they seem to talk to one another. So, so that's published by Blood Axe. That's Salima Hill.
Are they presented as poems? Because they're all, obviously, as you said, all one poem.
Oh, yes.
How are they presented on the page?
They're absolutely presented as poems. They're 2-line or 4-line poems with a title. I mean, the first section, which, as I said, is called The Anaesthetist, every poem is called they're arranged in alphabetical order. The Anaesthetist.
Do they all roll on in a narrative?
Yes, but you have to do the work. You have to find your way through. The anaesthetist, the banker, the care worker, the chauffeur, the childhood sweetheart, the classics teacher. The childhood sweetheart, and then we'll move on, but the childhood sweetheart I've just spotted here. Look, this is brilliant. The childhood sweetheart. Nobody lives here except sheep. We spend the days standing in the river eating sloes and freshwater shrimp. He is one, and I the other, gender.
Oh.
So good. Anyway, I recommend all these books, but that's such an interesting elliptical kind of collection. Salima Hill, Men Who Feed Pigeons. The book chat will continue on the other side of this message.
Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
The rural way of life is about making everyone feel at home. Tractor Supply chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business to transform intelligent customer service. Together, we put the power of AI to work across 2,200 stores, keeping things running seamlessly inside, curbside, and countryside. This is elevated customer experience. This is Tractor Supply with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic famous foods from restaurants across the country, anywhere, nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. They ship Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garten's famous cakes. So if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT.
John, what more have you been reading?
I've been reading an even bigger book than the last book.
Hooray!
I'm talking.
Oh my God,
epic,
it's taken up the whole screen.
goodness.
large, and I am. Where am I? I am.
2 pages in.
God, no,
It still counts.
I'm about
It
here.
still counts.
Yeah, where is it? Yeah, so one of the things about this book, the book that I'm holding up, everybody, is a novel, and it is a work of genius. It really.
How many pages is it?
It is.
Hey, don't take my question.
It looks a lot from
It's
here.
a lot.
Well, one of the curious things about this book is that it's numbered backwards. So you start on page 892. So
Countdown. What is the novel in question?
the novel in
please?
question is The Books of Jacob by Olga Tokarczuk, who is last year's was it last year or the year before's Nobel Prize winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature. Published by In Translation, a brilliant translation by Jennifer Croft, by Fitzcarraldo Editions in the UK. I had read her previous book, which was called Flights, which I loved, which was much more contemporary and very Zebaldian.
Mhm.
This is set in 18th century Poland, and I'm not going to give it a full review because I haven't finished it, but it is the most immersive. This, if anything, got me through my COVID delirium. It was this book.
Oh, there's your quote for the cover.
It's
So if you're out there with COVID at the moment, people, this is the book to buy.
all I'm going to do is read you the subtitle because
All right,
it is
okay.
the most immersive. It is as though you are in 18th century Poland in a small provincial town where there's a Jewish community, there's a Catholic community, there's an Orthodox community. It's the smells, it's like the best of Russian literature, but it's also got this incredibly modern sensibility. I've not read anything. I haven't read anything like this ambitious and this brilliant for a long, long time, I have to say. So I'm going to store up my breathless superlatives for when I've actually finished.
You're going to bring this back to the group.
But I'm going to
aren't
give you the
later?
subtitle because I think it captures a spirit of The Books of Jacob, or a fantastic journey across 7 borders, 5 languages, and 3 major religions, not counting the minor sects, told by the dead, supplemented by the author, drawing from a range of books and aided by imagination, the which being the greatest natural gift of any person, that the wise might have it for a record, that my compatriots reflect, lay persons gain some understanding, and melancholy souls obtain some slight enjoyment. Isn't that a brilliant dedication
Wow.
for a novel?
All novels should have a subtitle
in
like that.
awe. I don't think I've read anything quite as remarkable for a very long time. And the translation is flawless.
There is a
Jennifer
buzz around this novel, isn't there?
There
I
is.
see
Our
people
friend
enthusing
Catherine
about it.
Taylor gave it a glowing review. I mean, it's, let's just say it's long, but it's not long. It's one of those books when if you're in that slightly kind of delirious state, fiction is the most brilliant thing. That kind of half awake, half asleep. And it's I'll bring it back and tell you what
Yeah, please.
if it can sustain it for the next 500 pages.
You're a mere 350
I'm a mere 300
pages in.
in,
Yeah. It's called The Books of Jacob.
And it's
Right.
Olga Tokarczuk, and it's published by Fitzcarraldo, and marvelous. It's the book that won her the Nobel Prize, I think. Is the
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And you've got another
shall I tell you my this is a book called The Word Hoard, which is basically it's a book about, it's a little history of Anglo-Saxon, and it's just if you're interested remotely in language or Anglo-Saxon in particular, the lives of the Anglo-Saxons, it tells you learn a huge amount by, she takes you through the vocabulary for eating and drinking, for warfare, for religion, for sort of, self-knowledge.
Who's that by?
And it's by Hannah Vidine. Now, Hannah Vidine runs the brilliant @OE Word Hoard, that very popular, an Anglo-Saxon word a day on Twitter, and that's kind of where the book starts. But I'll read it. Shall I read you a tiny?
Yeah. So, listeners who joined us at Beowulf, well, this is one for them.
This is, in fact, yeah. Stand back.
Oh, really?
What we Gardena in Argadegum Theo Kiniga Thrum ye frunon who the ethelingas Ellen Fremedon.
Have you still got that kind of chesty stuff from COVID? Is there something wrong?
So what she says is, it's not obvious how this should be read aloud, let alone what it means. Guesswork is hopeless. Even a rough pronunciation guide for these lines is unlikely to help. So, and then she goes through explaining why it's, you end up with, so we spear days in days gone by, great kings of glory heard of how those noble men brave deeds performed. That doesn't make much sense grammatically to us, but for those speaking it, word order wasn't essential. Unlike Middle and Modern English, Old English uses inflection, word endings, rather than syntax to indicate meaning. When we say, the cat chased the dog, it means something different from the dog chased the cat, even though the spelling and form of the words are identical. The syntax, subject, verb, object tells you who is chasing who and who's being chased. In Old English, as in Latin, you have to look at the word endings, as, etc., to get the meaning. Armed with this knowledge, if we were to translate these lines using modern syntax, we'd get something like, so, we have heard about the glory of the Spear Danes, great kings in days gone by, how those noble men performed brave deeds. This not only makes sense, it has the stirring sound of an epic about to begin. Each time a translator tackles Beowulf, and we know about them, they must balance how true they are to the text, how easily their translation is understood by modern readers. And on top of that, every writer has their own literary style, their own unique voice. Reading a new translation of the poem can sometimes feel like reading a new poem. It took us many steps to reach an understanding of these lines, and it would be the same with most other Old English texts, whether poems or land charters, sermons or medical remedies. Old English is the language you think you know until you actually hear or see it. It may as well be a foreign language to English speakers today, and as with any foreign language, we learn Old English with study, practice, and ideally a good teacher. This book is not like a language primer so much as an old photo album. Old English words are familiar but also strange, like seeing pictures of your parents as children. There's something recognizable in their smiles. But before digging into the more recent family history, blah, blah, and then she goes on. And
oh, it's great.
So it's it's really well written. As you know, I've I've done a bit of Anglo-Saxon in my time. Yes, it's a very, very superior toilet book, published by Profile.
I was going to say, what do you buy the man who published Cain's Jawbone at Christmas?
Yeah, bliss.
Turns out to be this. Okay, so that's The Word Hoard by
Hannah Vidine.
Okay,
published by Profile.
Well, we're going to hear a poem from the third and final collection of poetry I want to talk about, but let's just hear the poem first.
During the past 2 years of this pandemic, we've all had, perhaps more than we like, time with ourselves. And even though this poem predates that pandemic experience, I think it might still speak to it. Selfie. Sitting alone in the house, eating my fingernails, watching the sky move away. The room is full, versions of me crouching on the floor, balancing on the windowsill, reclining on the pout of my lower lip, asleep in the crease of my eyelid. Not alone, with myself, a snare I have been running from. I do not live the way humans are supposed to. Compare my face to others you know. I fall short, an embarrassing fringe. No matter what face I try on, it's exhausting. All versions shake our heads. There is much to do until we think we are not what we are. Victoria's. I see those letters written on envelopes I know are for me because of the shape of that word, that greedy V. It's two arms open wide, ready to accept anything.
That is Victoria Kenefick reading her poem Selfie from a collection called Eat or We Both Starve. This is her debut collection, slightly mind-blowingly. Shortlisted for the Costa and again for the T.S. Eliot.
Amazing.
How different, right? This is what I mean. How different. They're all on the same shortlist. How different they all are from one another. And actually, I was so pleased to find that because I'm going to read...
Man, it's good for poetry at the moment, isn't it? It's just
I'm going to read
incredible.
one of her poems myself, and then we're going to hear from another poem by her. But she's such a good reader of her work. This is a really interesting, provocative, rather beautiful, and rather disturbing collection about the relationship between Irish history, female identity, and food. And I went into it thinking, what am I going to get from this? And I came out of it thinking, well, like all great poetry, what I got was the sense that I was somebody else. And Victoria Kenefick's ability to articulate a way of seeing the world, a place and a way of life, seemed to me totally persuasive and surprising, actually. And again, I read this twice because it took me the first reading to get my head round some of the reference points, and then having got them, go back and dig into them. And again, like the previous two collections I've talked about, what I'm fascinated by is volumes of poetry that work as volumes in their own right. You know, there is an argument that says you shouldn't do that the poem is the atomic element and the poem should be separate. But all the volumes of poetry that I really like work as books. And these all work as books. These all are collections which are structured with a view that you would read them through. So I'm doing them something of a disservice today by picking out individual poems. If you want to read them as books, you should read them as books because that's the intention.
Isn't it a little bit like albums? You know, if you're just sticking stuff in to fill inside too, it's probably not going to be I think that whole idea of the shape of a collection is really important. And I've like you, I've started to now. I love to go back and read, you know, my favorite poets in their original collections, because there are quite often poems that don't make it into selected poems if they're the kind of writers, or it's just also there's just a sequencing. You can see that there's been thought put into the way the poems are arranged.
Yeah, it's like, Nikki, you were asking me about Salima Hill. Are they set out as poems? In a sense, all the books are the same. They're all, you could read them all as long poems full of poems. The poems speak to one another as they go along.
But can you quote them all separately?
Well, I'm going to read one, and then we're going to hear Victoria reading another one, because I think there is a real difference between what I'm able to achieve and what she, the author, is able to achieve. But that, you know, I'm cutting myself some slack there. I just thought it was really interesting to hear a man read one of these as opposed to a woman who is the author read one of them. So this poem is called Choke. I want to hold things in my mouth. A key, buttons, a fingernail, the click of a boiled sweet against enamel. A toddler, I stole my mother's pills, prized the lid off the bottle with tiny teeth, arranged the capsules by colour and size. My mother panicked when she found me, tablets skittled on the bedspread. At the hospital, the nun held the cup of charcoal to my mouth. I spat black into a white bowl. Its burnt taste, I thought, must be bad. A child, given a boiled sweet by a cousin, I popped it in my mouth, turned a dainty shade of blue. My father spun me upside down, the sweet shaken loose. In another version, my mother pushes the sweet down my throat with a finger. Or maybe that was when I was 3 and nearly choked in a different cousin's house, gagging on another boiled sweet. Maybe that's what I'm looking for. My mother's finger down my throat, pushing sugar deep into me. I mean, that seems to me so personal and brave, that poem, to hand it over to me to read, as it were. That is really, really striking.
If I was a listener, Andy, I'd be saying, "Ooh, I got halfway through that and then I had to order it."
Well, good.
It's such a
good.
That sounds amazing. I mean, it is.
Get it from the library.
Rich,
get it from the bookshop.
Really,
all three of these
poetry.
All three of these are brilliant. They're nothing like one another, and different age groups, different types of poetry, different effects, different concerns. They're all marvelous. Let's hear another one from Victoria herself. This is Victoria Kenefick reading Cork Schoolgirl Considers the GPO, Dublin 2016.
Cork Schoolgirl Considers the GPO, Dublin 2016. I'm standing outside the GPO in my school uniform, which isn't ideal. My uniform is the colour of bull's blood. In this year, I am 16, a pleasing symmetry because I love history. Have I told you that? It is mine, so I carry it in my rucksack. I love all the men of history sacrificing themselves for Ireland, for me, these rebel Jesuses. I put my finger in the building's bullet holes, poke around in its wounds. I wonder if they feel it, those boys. I hope they do. Their blooming faces pressed flat in the pages of my books. I lick the wall as if it were a stamp. It tastes of bones, this smelly city, of those boys in uniforms. Theirs bloody too. I put my lips to the pillar. I want to kiss them all. And I do. I kiss all those boys goodbye.
So good.
Brilliant.
So there you go. That collection is called Eat or We Both Starve by Victoria Kenefick.
Oh, that's
Anyway,
brilliant, Andy. Thanks for bringing us to
God,
those
just really wonderful. I'll tell you what else about poetry. Poetry, and like reading, is a solitary pleasure. But as soon as we talk about it, it unpacks it in a different way. Yeah. It's so interesting to have brought those to Backlisted today. So, yeah, so all the books are available to borrow from the library or buy from our bookshop, I think. Are they? They probably are, aren't they?
Most of them, yeah.
Bookshop.org, you mean? /backlisted.
That is what I'm referring to.
The Backlisted bookshop on bookshop.org. Yeah.
We can't tell you what the next book is going to be on Backlisted, but it's very, very special for one member of the gang. And unless you're on our Patreon, in which case we'll be telling you next weekend. So there's still time to sign up for the episode of Lot Listed. We'll put it in that. And there might be a little competition in the next Lot Listed as well. But we'll save that for then.
A quiz.
Lot Listed for the uninitiated is us talking about not just books, but films and music and stuff like that too. So yeah, go to our Patreon if you want more of this.
It's quite like this, really, isn't it?
It is.
But we've got the next several episodes of Backlisted lined up and ready to go. We think you'll be pleased.
Yeah.
There's some good stuff coming up. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. Thanks, Nikki Birch from Backlisted. Is there anything you want to add? Are there any final matters you wish to bring to listeners' attention?
No, I'm just really looking forward to beating my number of books that I read last year, because I write them all down now since I've started working on Backlisted. And this year was a bit of a fallow year for me compared to last year, so I need to up my game.
We've ruined your life.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's excellent.
Anyway, so yeah, go forth and read. That's what I'm looking forward to, and excited to see what books we're going to have in this year.
All right,
Andy,
John, take it away.
That is all we have time for. Thank you for listening and for the support you've given us over the past year.
You can download all 153 previous episodes of Backlisted. And one day I'll say this without laughing. It just seems so absurd. There's 153 episodes. Anyway, you can download all 153 previous episodes, plus follow links, clips, and suggestions for further reading by visiting our website, backlisted.fm. And we're always pleased if you contact us on Twitter and Facebook, and now in sound and pictures on Instagram too.
You can also show your love directly by supporting our Patreon, as Nikki just said. www.patreon.com/backlisted. We aim to survive without paid-for advertising. Your generosity helps us do that. All patrons get to hear Backlisted episodes early, and for rather less than a Now TV subscription, Lock listeners get 2 extra Lock Listeds a month, the show where we 3 kick back and share notes on the things we've seen, heard, read, and mostly enjoyed in the previous fortnight.
Lock listeners also get to hear their names read out on the show as a mark of our thanks and appreciation. And this week's batch roll call is Susan Duffy, thank you, Paul Marshall, Dominic Hartley, Faye Young, Oliver Stanier, Luke Williamson, Vicky Johnson,
Matty Tong, the great Una McCormack.
McCormack.
Former guest. Well, I mean, former guest again, I'm
regular
sure.
guest.
Regular returning guest.
Michael Livingston, Anita Ives, Padma, Deborah Jones. And we're also delighted to welcome Susan Reynolds and Audrey Gaynor to our Guild of Master Storytellers, the highest tier in the Backlisted firmament. Thank you both for your generosity.
And Audrey.
And to all our patrons, huge thanks for enabling the 3 of us continue to do what we love and enjoy. And that's it.
Thanks very much, everybody. We hope you enjoy every single one of those books we talked about.
It's a lot of reading.
3 volumes of poetry and 2 very long books and a novel. And we'll see you on Backlisted next time. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
If you prefer to listen to Backlisted without adverts, you can sign up to our Patreon. It's www.patreon.com/backlisted. As well as getting the show early, you get a whole 2 extra episodes of what we call Lock Listeds, which is Andy, me, and Nikki talking about the books, music, and films we've enjoyed in the previous fortnight.